Welcome back everybody. So, just a bit of fun today. We've all got our favourite controllers, I'm sure. I know I've got mine. And I could probably pick out sort of my top 5 really, but I didn't. I thought I'd do something a bit different rather than just say what my favourite 5 were. What I'm going to do is run through all the generations of consoles and sort of say which is my favourite of that kind of generation, and kind of a controller wars, if you like, through the generations of consoles. Now, I mean, obviously there's hundreds of controllers, you know, all varying kinds, third party, official, whatever. I'm just going to stick to the main consoles and official controllers, generally speaking. So, you know, I'm not going to include like obscure consoles. I'm just purely sticking to the main ones like Atari, Sega, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft. That's it. You know, I'm not including like, you know, one-off obscure stuff like 3DO or, you know, CDI, you know, Jaguar perhaps, you know, just mainstream stuff. So, round 1, which is kind of the first generation of stuff, if you like. You know, 8-bit era, so obviously things were quite primitive. I mean, I started off on the Spectrum, that was my first entry into gaming, but, you know, you had the sort of bog standard joystick. There were a multitude of these, all varying designs. You know, generally speaking, one fire button. And, you know, like I say, there's hundreds of them, all different sorts. But then obviously the first mainstream console was the 2600, which is more or less the same idea. Only, I mean, you've just got the one fire button obviously and a joystick, and that's it. Now I've got no nostalgia for this because I never had an Atari at the time. So to me, you know, the nostalgia of it is lost on me. So I'm coming at it from like a much more modern perspective. I think it's a terrible controller. But I appreciate if you loved it at the time, you might think differently. But I don't think it's comfortable to hold. I don't like the stick. The button's kind of okay, but it's not for me. Yet, that said, it's better than some of the alternatives at the time, like the ColecoVision and Intellivision. This is a ColecoVision controller, but the Intellivision is very similar, where you've got like a numbered keypad. I mean, it kind of looks like a telephone, I know, but this is the joystick, and these are the fire buttons, and it's so hard to hold, use the joystick, and press the fire buttons at the same time. You're kind of holding it like that and firing like that or like that. Really awkward to use. It's an awful controller. I mean, it spoils this is a great console, but this controller really spoils the enjoyment of it up to a point. So, you know, I'd put the Atari one in front of those, definitely, but perhaps not in front of the traditional home micro style joystick. And that being said, the king of those for me, and the king of this generation, is the Konic Speed King. This is a 2-button variant, but you can get these in, you know, standard 1-button form. This has got auto fire as well. But these are awesome. That ergonomic, they fit your hand perfectly. You fire with your fingers there. Like I say, this one's got auto fire. Beautiful micro switch joystick. It's just, it's a stunning controller. Absolutely love the Konic Speed King. And without doubt, that's my favourite one of that kind of era. So, round 2. We're on to sort of 8-bit consoles, if you like. Or more modern 8-bit consoles. We've got the one that I had back in the day, my console of choice, and that's the Master System. This is the one I've got the nostalgia for, so I've got, you know, just got a special place in my heart. this is an original style with the side entry wire and the screw-in joystick in the middle. But then obviously at the same period of time you had the NES, which I didn't have. You know, as I say, I had this, and you know, the classic NES controller. And then also in the same kind of era, although you know, perhaps not technically quite the same, you've got the PC Engine controller. So, you know, they're all kind of the same really. They're all very rectangular. A D-pad and 2 buttons. I think with hindsight, although my nostalgia is for this realistically is the worst of the three. The D-pad, I don't think is very good, if I'm honest. So I'm really picking between these two. I do like these later PC Engine pads with the auto fire on. That was a great invention, I think. And I think we should have had more of that really on first party controllers. This is a really nice pad, but I think I'm going to give the win to the NES. It's such an iconic pad. I mean, it functions really, really well. And if you sort of include the later Dogbound controller from the later AV Famicom, they are superb. That is a great controller. So I think actually I should have included that really. I'm going to do that dreaded thing Marcus hates. We're back. Yes, the Dogbound controller. This is superb. Kind of an evolution of that, but this is comfortable to hold, much more so than that one is. So I think my definite pick from this era is the Dogbound NES controller. Lovely to play with. Right, round 3, which is obviously 16-bit. Things were moving on, obviously. Technology was improving. And obviously we had the major players, Sega and Nintendo. Again, I was Sega. So I've got a lot of fondness for the Mega Drive pad. And this is still a fantastic pad to this day, I think. Really good to use. And more importantly, it's really comfortable to hold. A fantastic controller, I would say. Obviously, alongside that, you had the Super Nintendo controller. Again, lovely and ergonomic, feels comfortable. Then we had the obvious invention of the shoulder buttons, and a magnificent D-pad. This is a stunning controller, I've got to say. And then obviously there was the later evolution of the Mega Drive controller, which the Mega Drive 6 button. Again, this is a superb controller, and I think this is the greatest D-pad possibly on anything. So the Mega Drive 6 button is a stunner. And then I couldn't not mention this. I know it's kind of going against what I said at the start because it's very niche, but I think I've got to mention the granddaddy, the Neo Geo controller, which I know is quite different because it's an arcade stick, but in many ways you can't not pick this for that kind of generation. But I won't, purely because it's so niche, but it's truly magnificent, and it's just, I don't know, there's no other arcade stick that feels like this. It just, there's something about it. It's got a magic feel and sound, and it's just stunning. However, all that said, I think this is close. I think this is the most difficult one to pick out of the best of this generation. But I think I've got to go with the Super Famicom or Super Nintendo controller. It's so iconic. It's beautiful to use. feels good in the hand, but it's that D-pad. It is great. You know, that said, it's not as good as that 6-button Sega D-pad, and this would have been better with 6 buttons. Really, more like this. I don't know. This is so difficult. This era. I don't know. I might change my mind. I'm going with this. I think the Sega 6-button pad. I mean, hardly any games needed it beyond outside Street Fighter, really. But purely as a controller and a functional bit of kit, I think this is the best of that generation. But very difficult. If you think the SNES is better, you know, I wouldn't argue with you. But let me know what you think of any of this. It's all just an opinion. None of it really matters. Right, round 4. So we're now into the 32-bit era, and again, things were changing quite a lot now. Things were getting much more ergonomic, and obviously analog came into the equation. The first, obviously, I suppose the biggest success story of this era is the PlayStation, and it was quite groundbreaking when it came out, this controller. I mean, it looked so different, and it's a funky controller, I'll give it that. It's definitely funky, and you know, it was all part of that time. It became trendy, and you know, it was bang on point. But as a controller, I'm not convinced it's all that. It's alright. This is by far the best PlayStation controller, in my opinion. It's quite nice, but it's by no means the best of this generation. You also then had the N64, and this is obviously what introduced analog. Now, a lot of people hate this, and I don't understand why, if I'm honest. I think it's a good controller. I've got no problems with it. People moan about it, you know, where do you hold it? It's blooming obvious, isn't it? If you're playing with an analog game, which most were, you hold it there and there. And if you're playing with a D-pad, you hold it there. Basic, you know. And as such, it works really, really well, I think. It's a shame those sort of C buttons weren't a bit bigger and the same size as A and B. I think that's my biggest criticism with this pad. But overall, I don't think it's too bad. But it's by no means the best. That accolade is reserved for the mighty Sega Saturn. Now, this is a truly magnificent controller. Very much an evolution of the Mega Drive 6-button controller. They've just made it better. It's more ergonomic. You've got the shoulder buttons. It's got the same magnificent D-pad. 6 buttons. Controllers do not get any better than this. I think without question, this is the greatest controller ever made. End of. And then obviously Sega themselves brought out the analog pad then. Now this looks a bit ugly. I don't think it's a particularly nice looking pad, but it's very functional and it does work really well. I like the analog stick. It's still got the same magnificent D-pad, 6 buttons. Again, it's got analog triggers. It's comfortable to hold. This is it's not as nice as the original, I don't think, purely on appearance purposes, but it's still a fantastic controller and highly recommended. Right, we're on to round 5. So obviously Microsoft entered the fray at this point with the first Xbox, and obviously the original controller, the Duke, never a fan, hated it. Way too big. I still don't like it. I have got one, but it's locked. It's in storage somewhere. I couldn't lay my hands on it right for this. So we've got the upgraded one. I do think this is a lot better than the Duke, and it's not a bad controller. I just I don't know. I don't like these two buttons here, or them two. Those four buttons, they just irritate me. Taking that out of the equation, it's comfortable to use. It's a good controller. The D-pad's kind of okay. I don't think it's a bad controller of the Xbox. Then, obviously, my passion was Sega, still is. You had the Dreamcast, and this was such a disappointment. Considering they'd already made this, I don't know how they went to this, because this was perfect as it was. Just stick the VMU in this, happy days. But for some unknown reason, they've took two buttons off it, and they've stuck the worst D-pad known to man on it. And I don't like the analog as much as the Saturn one either. It's lovely to control, lovely to hold, and I think it's quite a nice looking pad. And the VMU thing, that was brilliant, great invention. But there are just too many flaws to make this a possible winner in this round for me. It's just always tinged with disappointment, this controller, for me. Obviously, again, the big player was Sony, and you had the PS2 controller, which was an evolution of the original one. Pretty much the same as the DualShock for the PS1, I suppose, really. And for me, like I said, I quite like the PS1 controller. I'm not that keen on this. It just feels too cramped. And that's a criticism I've got of all Sony controllers, really. They feel too cramped with the DualShock analog sticks on them. I just don't like the layout. I think, again, they look funky, but I just don't think it, for me, it just functionality wise, it's just not ticking the box for me. And so for that reason, I can't possibly consider this as my winner for this round. That accolade has to go to Nintendo for the GameCube. Now, I would say, personally, whatever you think of it, it's the most comfortable controller to hold in your hand ever made. It's obviously very unique to each individual person, but for my hands, this feels like it was made custom for me. It just feels awesome. I love the sort of shape of the triggers. The sticks all feel good. The D-pad is a bit small. I wish that was a bit bigger, like a standard D-pad. That said, you very rarely use it on the GameCube, so in that sense, it's not really very important. And I know it won't be for everybody, but I like these different shaped buttons. I don't know, it just feels, it's easily identifiable what's what, and I just really like that. And you could say the Wavebird's even better because it's wireless. You know, it's a great controller. It doesn't look as nice, I don't think, with obviously the sensor built into it. It don't look quite as appealing. This, I do love it. So the winner for me in this round, definitely the GameCube. Right, what's this, round 6? Yeah, round 6. So we're getting now quite modern from my point of view. Obviously Nintendo came out with the Wii, but we had the nunchuk as well. I mean, it is what it is. It kind of worked for what it was, you know. Motion control is not for me. I've never liked it. I rarely played games that used it. I traditionally use this with a nunchuk or with like a classic controller. So although, you know, revolutionary and in many ways brilliant, it just wasn't for me. And if you're purely using this as a controller, I mean, it does work. Works really well. It's a good D-pad. It's just like a stick in it. So there's no way I can award that the win. Obviously then, Sony, again, a big player. They had the DualShock 3, or 6-axis this one. 6-axis this one. this is a terrible controller in my opinion. I hate this. This is by far the worst Sony controller. It's got the same sort of cumbersome, cramped, crowded nature of the PS2 controller for me, and the lightweight feel to it. It's just horrible. So that only leaves me with one area to go in, which is the 360, and that's by far the best controller of this generation in my opinion. This is a lovely controller. It's so comfortable. It's not cluttered. Everything works. The D-pad's quite good. You could argue if 6 buttons would have been nice, but you know that seems to have gone by the by now, really. You know, you buy an arcade stick if you want 6 buttons, don't you, really? But this is a lovely controller to use. By far the best controller of this generation, without doubt. So what's that, round 7? Yeah, we're on to round 7, which is pretty much current gen. And there is a bit of a crossover in that the Wii U and the Switch kind of the same thing, aren't they, really? So I'm kind of including both together here, really, because you know the Wii U wasn't successful, was it? Well, the Switch is basically a Wii U too, isn't it, really? So we've got the Wii U controller and we've got the Switch Pro controller. I mean, the Joy-Cons are awful, dreadful controllers. This is a lot better. Again, it's so similar to this, really. You've just got the stick in a slightly different place. I think of the two, I prefer the Switch Pro controller. And you know, it's not bad. This, I think it's more than respectable. It's a good controller. I wouldn't say the same about the Joy-Cons. Joyless cons, somebody once said in one of my comments. I think it was Mark Lowe's Blind Gaming, and he's so right. So that then brings me on to the PS4. Now, this is by far the best Sony controller that I've ever used. It's by no means perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than the DualShock sort of original and on the PS2 and 3. Not a bad controller. The D-pad is definitely the best one up to this point that they've used, but again, I can't award this the win in this generation for me. That has to go to the Xbox One. Again, a fantastic controller in my opinion. Very similar to the 360. But it's got nice, lovely textures on these. And there's a beautiful weight to them that really feels substantial. You know, the D-pad is really, really good. And you obviously get them in all kinds of colours. This is a superb controller in my opinion. It's right up there for me as one of the best ever made. Absolute stunner of a controller. And like I say, some of the designs are mega. That Forza one that came out with, I wished I'd bought that. That is a stunner. Xbox One controller is fantastic. And that's where my story ends, really. I know there's another generation, but it's not something I've delved into. I've got no interest in getting an Xbox Project Titan Series XYZ, whatever they're called. And I've got no interest in getting a PS5 at present either. Though that PS5 controller I do think looks nice, and by far the best PlayStation controller they've ever done. It looks a far better shape. I've heard loads of people say and read that this haptic feedback is magnificent. You know, everybody knows I like pink. I was so tempted just to buy that pink controller because it looks so nice. So, you know, I can't speak of how good or bad it is because I've never used one. And the same for the latest Xbox. Again, I've not used it. I'm assuming it's great because it's going to be an evolution, I would assume, of that Xbox One controller, which is fantastic. So, I would imagine those two current ones are both really good without having used them. But that's kind of where I'm imagining they would be. But there we go, that was just a bit of fun, I thought, run through my thoughts on the varying controllers of the generations. I'm sure your opinions are different. Let me know in the comments what you think. Always good to hear from people, that's what it's all worthwhile doing these things for. But let me know anyway. Thanks for watching, I hope to see you soon. Sayonara.